And away we go. Welcome, folks. I'm leecamp. This is Dangerous Ideas. Thanks for being here. Let's dig into the updates on Israel's special genocide operation as they continue to commit a long and exhausting list of war crimes against the people of Palestine. But I will also be getting into what else will we do? Well, for one, it's a big show. I got presidential candidate Claudia de la Cruz, the U.S. presidential candidate, here coming up in about half an hour. She will be joining me. I will also be talking about the U.S. media and how they manipulate this ongoing war, the coverage of it. It's not really a war; it's just straight up a genocide. Today, I got called a self-hating Jew to my face, which is interesting because I didn't know, growing up Jewish, I didn't know that endorsing genocide was part of it. At no point, like during the bar mitzvahs or any of that stuff, do they say, listen, also, you just got to be for all genocides. Because if that's the truth, if in order to be a good Jew, you have to endorse genocide, then that is a shitty religion, really is. So I didn't realize that was how it worked. And I'm glad, I got educated today that apparently you have to endorse genocide to get on the honor roll list for Jews. Hello, everyone, and please make sure to click the thumbs up, the like, all that stuff. We're coming up on 60,000 subscribers on YouTube. This is my second YouTube channel after the first one with 250,000 subscribers was banned around the world. So thank you, folks, for continuing to support my stuff, continuing to help this grow, continuing to get the truth out there as we fight for a better world, for truth and equality and justice and so much more. A little bit of update on day 139 of Israel's ongoing genocide. Israel has, according to Al Jazeera, has reinvaded Nasser Hospital. The health ministry says because, they didn't get enough war crimes. The list of war crimes that they had committed was looking a little shallow, so they figured why not attack a hospital again. I covered this for you a few days ago, they already kidnapped many of the hospital directors, the heads of surgery, things like that, because as I've mentioned many times, Israel wants to kill as many people with disease, with wounds, with other issues as they do with bombs. So that's part of why they are destroying the health systems. Also, the Medics Sans Frontier, the MSF, Doctors Without Borders, although they think their name is Medics Sans Frontier. No, it's Doctors Without Borders. All right. English is the world language. None of this MSF crap. Israel's Gaza, the MSF director has said Israel's Gaza campaign is a war of collective punishment, which, is a light way of putting it, but that is a war crime. It is a war crime to collectively punish people, basically punishing civilians, killing civilians for crimes you believe have done against your people or whatever. And I should mention this, speaking of me earlier today being called a self-hating Jew, the person said to me, they said, well, Hamas took hostages. Israel would never do that. I hope that made you laugh because that is hilarious. And I then responded, actually, Israel had 5,000 Palestinian hostages before October 7th. They now have, 10 or 12,000 or something like that. But before October 7th, they had 5,000 Palestinian hostages. And the person said, I don't think they'd call them hostages. And I said, I bet you're right. Israel probably does not call them hostages because they are liars. Like, who do you think the women and children who were released in the one hostage exchange that did happen, who do you think they were? Where do you think Israel got them? You think they just appeared because the Lord's on their side? The Lord createth women and children that Israel could release? Or do you think those were women and children who were being held in prison before October 7th? What do you think? Anyway, some updates there on day 139 of this ongoing genocide. As I told you the other day, the U.S. vetoed, it's Freudian slip times, folks, which I know all of you love videos of Freudian slips where the ruling elite admit what they're up to, admit what's actually going on. I have 3 beautiful Freudian slips for you here. As I told you the other day, the U.S. was the only ones, even the UK abstained. Even ongoing colonizer, ongoing brutal war criminals, the UK abstained from the vote. The US was the only one to vote to veto this ceasefire deal in the UN, or the call for ceasefire, obviously. So here is a bit of a Freudian slip by the U.S. representative at the UN. Take a listen to what she says at the end of this clip.
We intend to do this the right way so that we can create the right conditions for a safer, more peaceful future. And we will continue to actively engage in the hard work of direct diplomacy on the ground until we reach a final solution.
Perhaps terms you should not use when discussing an ongoing genocide perpetrated by Israel. Final solution, not the words to use. And apparently she was looking at papers. So did she in front of her giant words, final solution, written across it? Wrong words, my friend. Wrong words to use when you're discussing a genocide being perpetrated by Israel. But also within that, she says the ridiculous statement, this is the U.S. vetoing a call for ceasefire. Let's remember, this does not guarantee a ceasefire. The UN voting for ceasefire does not mean it happens. But this is just the UN saying, we would like for there to be a ceasefire. There needs to be a ceasefire. That's what it is. And even that, the U.S. had to veto to make sure it didn't happen, to make sure the UN did not call for a ceasefire. But within her statement there, she said, look, we really want a ceasefire. Oh my goodness, do we want a ceasefire? But we've got to do it right. We've got to do it the right way. What the are you talking about? You can't call for a ceasefire because it's not perfect as children are being murdered every day. You can't. At 30,000, we've now hit 30,000, and that's not counting those lost under the rubble. So really well over 30,000 people have been murdered by Israel in just 4 months. 13,000 children, not including those lost under the rubble. And you aren't calling for a ceasefire or vetoing a ceasefire call because it's not. We got to make sure it's just right to ask them to stop murdering children. Are you out of your goddamn minds? But yeah, I wouldn't. Just a little note for the Biden administration and for those working with the Biden administration, such as the UN representatives. They all call it the final solution. It's a bad idea. It's a bad idea to call it the final solution. Okay. Let me bring you another quick clip of Freudian slips. This one is not new, but I figured as long as we're sharing Freudian slips, we might as well bring these. These are two different high-level Israeli spokespeople, and one of them is the Israeli ambassador. I think the other is a spokesperson. Anyway, enjoy.
Sorry, we are the victims. We are not the aggressor. Sorry.
Oh, man, it started in the middle of the clip.
We are not the victims. Sorry, we are the victims. We are not the aggressor. Sorry.
But I can tell you that we are not targeting anyone else in Gaza but civilians. Hamas is cynically, but rather terrorists, of course.
We are.
So in one of those, he says, we are not the victims. Then he eventually corrects himself and says, never mind, we are the victims. And the other one, which is the spokesperson, Netanyahu's spokesperson, she says, we are only targeting civilians in Gaza. Again, Freudian slips. You got to love Freud for at least that. Even if you have issues with certain other things he did, you got to love that Freud let us know what a Freudian slip is and that it often reveals truly what you're thinking, truly what you're believing is these Freudian slips. Okay, so while we're on the topic of spokespeople, and by the way, I am going to get to the main topic of this hour, which is the IDF proudly pillaging Gaza, proudly stealing, letting everyone know, again, committing war crimes, letting everyone know that they are proudly committing war crimes. I'll be getting to that in a moment. Please, everyone, hit thumbs up, hit subscribe, hit share, all those good things. We are so close to 60,000 subscribers on YouTube, so please do that. Make sure you click the bell icon after you do it. And anyway, so this is put out. This montage was put together by AJ Plus. And I wanted to show this first minute because it really does show the type of people, and then I'm going to bring you some more information on this, the type of people that our mainstream media and mainstream media in the West brings us to speak on Israel-Palestine, to speak on this ongoing genocide, the type of people that we are supposed to look to, according to our media. We are supposed to look to tell us the truth, to tell us what's really happening, to tell us what we should really be feeling about these events as bombs rain down on children. And this montage, this 1 minute montage, really clears it up. Or actually, the montage is even shorter than a minute. But
you're watching a segment on the brutal Israeli assault on Gaza as the Palestinian death toll mounts. The anchor mentions they have a guest or an analyst to discuss the loss of Palestinian civilian life. Who are you expecting to see? Are you expecting to see a human rights lawyer, a UN worker, maybe an actual Palestinian? Or are you expecting this?
Joining us now is Israeli government spokesperson Ilan Levy.
Joining me now, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, spokesman for the Israel Defense Forces.
I've been speaking to the Israeli government spokesperson, Mark Regev.
Joining me now is Shahar Azani, former Israeli diplomat and spokesperson for the Israeli consulate.
We are now joined by Ophir Falk. He's a foreign policy advisor to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
A key feature of Western reporting on Palestinians is who is allowed to tell the story of Palestinians, both the history of the occupation as well as real-time atrocities being committed by the Israeli state.
Great points and great montage put together there of who exactly is allowed to tell the story of Palestinians. It is almost never, very rarely, is it Palestinians who are allowed to tell the story of Palestinians. If they wanted to even pretend to give us both sides of the story, which there's not really a both sides in genocide. There's kind of a one side in genocide. But if they wanted to even pretend to give us both sides, you would give both sides. They do not give both sides. Now, this doesn't mean people can't point to, well, what about that CNN report 2 weeks ago where for 3 minutes they had on someone in Gaza who said they do not like being murdered? What about that report? Yes, you can point to a report here or there. That is not the point. The point is the ongoing type of coverage. And I'm about to give you even more numbers on how exactly this works. But I will also add something that AJ Plus was not adding in that segment, which is probably the biggest thing that our mainstream media, the mainstream media of the West, which is still, let's be honest, I wish it weren't true, it's still the number one driver of information. It's the number one place that people are still getting their information, especially on foreign policy. Maybe not as much when they can walk out their door and see that our infrastructure is collapsing and that their water tastes like burning. Maybe not for that, but for foreign policy and things like that, for what's going on around the world, still where people are getting it. The number one thing they do is just not talk about, for example, the genocide in Gaza. Like if you go and look at the videos, the video clips that are put up on CNN or MSNBC, or you just leave on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, any of them, you just leave them running, 97% or something of what you hear is going to be about Donald Trump. It is going to be about Donald Trump. Occasionally it'll be something about Biden. If it's Fox News, you're going to hear a lot about Biden. But in general, it is just Trump, 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 Trump. Did we mention Trump, 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 Trump? That is what they're doing. Now, that serves multiple purposes. One is the liberal media is trying to make sure he doesn't get elected again. But more important than that, that is used as a smokescreen. It is used as a veil. It is used as a curtain. It is used as a fourth thing that covers up your eyes. It is used as a thing to cover up the reality of what's going on in Israel, Gaza, Palestine, etc., as well as various other areas. It's also used to cover up the fact that the proxy war in Ukraine is achieving nothing but except murdering Ukrainians. So it's used in a lot of ways. But I wanted to bring you this report, and this was from before October 7th, which is important because this is not just This is not just, an analysis coming to you since October 7th. This is a decade-long analysis of who the U.S. media talks to when they want to talk about Israel, Palestine, any aspect of it. Who do they speak to? Who gets to write about Israel and Palestine? And it's this great analysis that this paragraph is titled Palestinians Not Needed. The author says, and this is coming from 972mag.com. They do great work, by the way, on Israel and Palestine. It says, I had expected to find relatively few opinion pieces by Palestinians. Shock. This is talking about mainstream media. So New York Times, Washington Post, etc., legacy media, etc. So I was expecting to find very few by Palestinians. And I was correct. But what surprised me was how much Palestinians have been talked about in major U.S. media outlets over the decades. In the New York Times, less than 2% of the nearly 2,500 opinion pieces that discussed Palestinians since 1970 were written by Palestinians. Less than 2% were written by Palestinians. In the Washington Post, the average was less than 1%. So the New York Times, they have the total opinion pieces adding up over the decades. The total is 1.8% written by Palestinians. Washington Post, of total number of articles about Palestine or Israel, is 3,249. The percentage by Palestinians, 1%. 1% by Palestinians. They also give some of the other outlets, The New Republic, since 1970, 497 pieces about Palestinians, 0 by Palestinians. 0. Not once. You think they would accidentally have one article written by a Palestinian. You think they just wouldn't be, the guy who normally checks to make sure no Palestinians ever get to say anything would be sick one day, or his kid is sick and he has to drive him to school, and then whoopsie, an article gets out by a Palestinian. But no, didn't happen. 0 since 1970. Then you got The Nation. Okay, The Nation, many of you know, Nation magazine is a more left-wing, semi-liberal outlet. It is definitely more left-wing than the New York Times, especially on issues of Russia. They've done a pretty good job of debunking a lot of Russiagate. They're one of the only outlets, them, Rolling Stone, and Forbes, believe it or not, are the only outlets to have covered the $21 trillion unaccounted for at the Pentagon over 15 years. 21 trillion, yes, with a T. I covered it, but that doesn't count. Anyway, so The Nation does some good stuff. Sometimes they do some garbage. But anyway, since 1970, 323 pieces about Palestinians, only 10%, 10.5% by of those by Palestinians. So just really impressive numbers showing how these outlets, and these are the papers of note, the papers of record, New York Times, Washington Post. This is even before October 7th. The only people who get to tell the story of what it is to be Palestinian, what it feels like to live there, what's happened over the years, what it feels like to live in an open-air prison in Gaza. The only people who get to tell those stories are not those people, nor even, you notice this just says by Palestinians. This could be Palestinian Americans. It could be Palestinians living anywhere in the world. It doesn't, I understand if it's kind of difficult to maybe find a Gazan that's even before October 7th that is able to write in English for the New York Times. Maybe that's a little difficult. Maybe you give them a little margin of error there. But this is even Palestinian Americans. Nobody is allowed to tell, or less than 1%, allowed to tell the story of Palestinians except non-Palestinians. And I'm sure a large percentage of those are, Israeli spokespeople, as we just saw in that montage by AJ Plus. So it really is all about covering up the narrative. Okay, I want to get to, before Claudia de la Cruz gets here, I want to, by the way, for those of you joining late, presidential candidate, U.S. presidential candidate, in case you were wondering what country, U.S. presidential candidate Claudia de la Cruz will be here in just a few minutes, and we'll be going to that. But before we get to that, I want to get to how Israel, by the way, smash the thumbs up button so hard that your computer stops functioning. Make sure you just completely obliterate your keyboard, okay? Because YouTube knows how hard you hit that button. I want to bring to you how proud the Israeli military is of their pillaging, of their war crimes, of their stealing of the material, the possessions of Gazans as they pillage and destroy that entire 25-mile area. Let's remember how small Gaza is as they continue to drop more bombs than the entirety of the Iraq War. It's a small 25 miles by 5, I think, miles wide. Small area, and Israel is just, they've dropped multiple times worth of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, on Gaza. Anyway, but they're not just killing people, they're also stealing things as they go. And this is also from 972 Mag. Rugs, cosmetics, motorbikes. Israeli soldiers are looting Gaza homes in mass. And I think it's important that this is not just like leaked out photos. This is IDF proudly posting photos of them stealing things. The photo at the top of this article is them playing poker or playing cards in a Gazan house that's been evacuated by people who are afraid they're going to be killed, if they weren't already killed. Israeli soldiers fighting in Gaza have not been shy about posting videos on social media, gleefully documenting their wanton destruction of buildings and humiliation of Palestinian detainees. But there is another war crime being readily documented by Israeli soldiers that has garnered less attention and condemnation despite its prevalence: looting. Other videos uploaded to social media in recent months show Israeli soldiers boasting about finding wristwatches that they brought home, unboxing someone's collection of soccer shirts, stealing rugs, groceries, jewelry. Someone wondered what to do with the quote-unquote gifts of Gaza, gifts from Gaza that her partner, a soldier, had brought back to her as gifts, sharing a photo of cosmetics products. Indeed, since the start of Israel's ground invasion in late October, soldiers have been taking whatever they can get their hands on from the houses of Palestinians who have been forced to flee. More than an open secret, the phenomenon has been widely and uncritically reported in the Israeli media. While rabbis from the religious Zionist movement have been answering soldiers' questions about what is permissible to loot according to Jewish law. Soldiers who returned from fighting in Gaza confirmed to 972 magazine and local call that the phenomenon is ubiquitous and that for the most part their commanders are allowing it to happen. Here's a quote from a soldier. Everyone knows that people are taking things. It's considered funny. People say, "Send me to The Hague," as a joke. It doesn't happen in secret. The commanders saw, everyone knows, and no one seems to care. I mean, I'm sure that part doesn't really shock a lot of people. If you're willing to murder an entire society, commit genocide, commit ethnic cleansing, destroy houses, destroy children, destroy hospitals, it doesn't seem like you'd really draw the line at stealing their cosmetics or their jewelry that's sitting in the house. Here's another quote. The commanders didn't really talk to us about it. They didn't say you couldn't take those things. So these are quotes from soldiers. Also, they show some photos from, this is Israeli television covering this story of things that are being stolen from Gaza, but they're covering it in kind of a positive sense of like, look what this soldier came back with. Look what they gave their friend as a gift. These are not, because these are propaganda outlets for Israel. I mean, any TV news channel in Israel that is allowed to be on the air is going to be, for the most part, with occasional exceptions, going to do full-on propaganda for the state of Israel. They are not allowed to really stray from that. Israel's passed more strict laws stopping media from revealing things that are or saying things that are opposed to, quote unquote, the war effort, which equals genocide. So, this is Israel, right? The most free state in the whole Middle East, we're told, right? It's free. You're free there, except if you want to say anything against the ongoing genocide. Channel 13 also reported on the phenomenon earlier this month. Rather than condemning it, however, the presenters simply noted that the videos are being shared around the world to shame Israeli soldiers. So the report was kind of criticizing, like, well, the world is shaming our soldiers, and I don't know why they're doing that kind of thing. I found this interesting, too. Rabbi Shmuel Eliyahu, the chief rabbi of the northern city of Safed, when he was asked about this, explained that because the Arabs in Gaza do not observe international conventions, we are not obliged to abide by any rules of war. So, which is completely not true. Israel is a state. They are expected to abide by the Geneva Conventions, by the rules of war. So that's a garbage point of view. But yes, rabbis are endorsing this genocide. Many rabbis have put out statements saying that it is, within religious practices and the allowable statutes to bomb hospitals and to kill children and all these things. Now, these rabbis, unfortunately, are completely morally corrupt, bankrupt, whatever you want to call it. They, along with a very large percentage of the Israeli populace, have fallen for this sad propaganda saying that it's okay to murder just an endless number of innocent civilians, and they do endorse it. But there is some positives I wanted to bring you, such as the fact that the BDS movement continues to grow, continues to hit Israel where it hurts, which is the same for pretty much most nation states. Is you hit their wallets, you hit them economically, and that is a big wound. Jewish Voice for Peace. By the way, if you want to follow a account of, social media of a Jewish organization that has been excellent on calling out this genocide, on fighting back against it, on protesting on the streets, on every level, Jewish Voice for Peace has been doing excellent work being against this genocide, against the horrific actions of Israel. In a huge win, this is from Jewish Voice for Peace, in a huge win for the boycott, divest, and sanctions movement, one of the world's largest pension funds announced it divested almost $500 million from Israel bonds. Norway's pension fund divested the entirety of their Israel bond holdings. And they say a BDS victory, Norway's pension fund divests $500 million from Israeli bonds. Let's see, the quote is from Beckham of HK Norway, a Norwegian trade union. Quote, "We believe that it is entirely wrong for the government's foreign pension fund to invest in government bonds which directly contribute to financing the war in a region like Gaza. Israel bonds are loans from individuals and institutions that send money directly into the Israeli government's war chest, controlled by the finance minister, an Israeli politician who openly calls for genocide and total ethnic cleansing of Palestinians." That finance minister's name is Bezalel Smotrich, and he has openly called for genocide. So when you invest, quote unquote, in Israeli bonds, you are sending money to this finance minister who has openly called for genocide. Like all forms of divestment, Israeli bonds divestment is a means of withdrawing financial complicity from Israeli apartheid, occupation, and genocide of Palestinians. And it's an opportunity to challenge the political and moral support undergirding Israeli violence and oppression. Undergirding, by the way, sounds dirty. It's not. I looked it up. It's as much as it sounds really vulgar. You can undergird something and it's not, you won't get me too'd. As people of conscience, to continue from the quote, we applaud this act of solidarity with Palestinians facing genocide as we celebrate the Norwegian pension fund for divesting from Israel's settler colonial regime. We also call on individuals and institutions invested in Israel bonds to follow suit. And they have an article there called Investing in Genocide, or Genocide is a Bad Investment, which excellent headline. Okay, folks, let's do it. Let's get to the special guest, and please take a second to hit thumbs up, hit subscribe, do all those great things, and hit the bell icon. And thank you to the tens of thousands of you watching around the world. You are making this show possible. But let's get to I'd like to call her a friend and presidential candidate Claudia de la Cruz.
You are definitely a friend.
Thank you so much. How you doing?
I'm okay. I'm okay. I think none of us could say that we're totally well these days, but we're okay. Yeah.
Yes.
How are you?
Yes. It's something I think it's my love of people, especially people that are fighting for good causes, where I always like to start off with a big "How you doing?" and then I realize that it doesn't necessarily fit the moment. But yeah.
But it's good to see you.
Yes, it is good to see you, and I'm glad you consider continuing the fight on these incredibly important issues. If you want to just start off by updating everyone on what you've been up to, and the protests against this ongoing genocide that you've been a part of.
Well, we've been out in the streets. We've been out in the streets working in coalition with other groups. People of consciousness, people who are very much coming to the conclusion of what a lot of us had been talking about for many years, that U.S. imperialism is death, that U.S. capitalism and the ruling class of the United States happen to be the most vile and brutal of them all. And so we've been hitting the streets, doing a lot of protesting. I mean, protesting has not stopped. It has not ceased for the last, coming close to 5 months at this point. And in terms of the campaign, we've been doing as much as we can to uplift, this fight against U.S. imperialism and the Israeli colonial state. Understanding that these are projects of, again, U.S. imperialism and colonialism, that Netanyahu and Biden are the issue now, but this has been ongoing. This is very much the foundation of both the U.S. and Israel as a creation of an empire and as a outpost of U.S. imperialism in the Middle East. And so we need to understand it as these projects that are being defended in a bipartisan way by the ruling class and its politicians. And so if we're able to understand it in this way, it also gives us some sort of, this is a long march. And so this is one battle out of the actual war that we have to wage as working class people, as people of consciousness, as people who are against this genocidal extermination of Palestinians and of people all over the globe, because it's what they do.
But I've heard, Biden speaking, Biden administration, Biden spokespeople, they say that they would like to see the civilians protected and they would like to see a ceasefire. So I don't understand why you're criticizing them.
I mean, $95 billion? Like, how are you going to talk about the safeguarding of civilians in Ukraine or the safeguarding of civilians in Palestine when you're putting billions of dollars towards war, towards their destruction? And I think people are seeing that so clearly, so vividly. We're talking about the slaughter of over 28,000 people. We're talking about the separation of over 17,000 children from their families. And they want to stand here and distract us from that by saying we want all civilians to be safe. Well, if you want all civilians to be safe, then stop financing genocide. Stop, providing weapons. I mean, the United States is the biggest weapons dealer. Like, it's unimaginable. And I think people are coming to the awareness that, again, U.S. empire does not care about Palestinians any more than they care about the children in this country. Yesterday I was reading this article in the New York Times that says that in New York City alone has an increase of over 500,000 people that have gone into poverty. 1 in 4 children are living below poverty line in New York City, which is one of the wealthiest cities. And it's also one of the cities that finances the Israeli military, because from our tax money in the New York state, there's over $300 million that are provided to the Israeli military, and over over $100 million that are provided from the New York City budget. And so while we have poverty increasing, you still are able to invest in war across. So you're launching war on the poor in the city, and you're also launching war against kids, babies in Palestine. And so
yeah, well, I was just going to say, and Hakeem Jeffries, your representative, is one of the biggest recipients of AIPAC money and endorsers of Israel and this genocide.
Yeah, it's him, it's Richie Torres, it's Mayor Adams, and again, they are people of color. And you'd think, right, slavery and colonialism is another way of slavery. These people do not care about those connections, and they do not care about the people in their districts. They do not care about humanity. I mean, what human being could see what's happening in Palestine and still support this genocide and still not call it for what it is? Like, how do you see babies being brought out of rubble? How do you see hospitals being blown out? How do you see, communities of faith, Adams, who wants to talk so much about being a Christian? Like, how do you see this happen and not be moved to say something, to stop this, to do something to stop it, and continue to instead receive the money and hush and, celebrate and condemn, this question? But what about Hamas? That is we're way beyond that. You're like, it's mass slaughter.
Yeah.
Like the words are, I'm missing the words lately, because it's like, it's mass slaughter. It is the closest thing to a Holocaust, and let's call it for what it is.
Yeah. And the what about Hamas thing has gotten very old very quick. It doesn't, even if the worst of the worst of the worst versions of October 7th were true, which they aren't, but were true, you still can't, it still doesn't justify a genocide. You still can't bomb hospitals and murder children. The percentage of children killed on average in modern warfare is like 4 to 8% in modern warfare. And in Gaza, it's 45%. I mean, it's just pure insanity. The person today who in person called me a self-hating Jew, then gave me the what about Hamas. They said, well, Hamas took hostages, Israel would never do that. And I said, Israel had 5,000 hostages before October 7th.
That's right. So, that's right. Yeah. And after that, and just probably a week after that, had over 10,000. Because we have to be conscious of the fact, again, that this is a war of extermination that has been happening for over 75 years. It didn't just happen. And it has been an extermination campaign that the United States of America has supported and has financed, that the British have done the same. And so we need to be able to, again, understand where the roots of the problem lies. And it's colonialism, it's U.S. imperialism. And for as long as we have those two projects, we will continue to fight for the liberation of Palestinians. Like, this is a long struggle, because what we want is the total liberation of Palestine. We want people to have the right to return to their homes. The hundreds of thousands of families that have been displaced. It is cruel. It is the destruction of generations, of culture, of, I was talking to someone the other day, and we were talking about, slavery and the way in which people were robbed, like stolen from their land and brought here. And it's very similar. You steal not only the people, you steal the potential of any nation to develop. You steal the creativity of a people, the intellect of a people, to be able to build up their community and their space. That's what the colonial state of Israel has done to the Palestinian people. That's what U.S. imperialism has done. And so we need to be able to see this again as a long march, as a long struggle. And this is just one battle. And we were saying the person that was calling you a self-hating Jew, let me just say, I honestly do believe that the worst and the most case of anti-Semitism is Zionism.
Yeah.
Zionism
Yeah.
is the worst of it all, because it pretends and it wants to make the illusion that somehow Jewish people fall into a Zionist project, and that is nothing but the biggest lie that there could be.
Yeah.
Because it
Yeah.
doesn't operate for.
No, Israel and the supporters have spent a lot of money over many decades trying to get everyone to conflate Judaism with Zionism, acting like you cannot be anti-Zionist if you're Jewish, and acting like anyone who supports Israel is, equivalent to Jewish. And of course, none of it's true. There are more Zionist Christians in the United States than there are Jews in the world. But on top of that, there are millions of anti-Zionist Jews, and Israel, the Israeli propaganda is predicated on getting people to confuse these things. And like you said, they increase anti-Semitism, 100-fold by committing a genocide and telling everyone, well, all Israel is all Jews, therefore all Jews are committing genocide. Like, by their logic, it actually increases anti-Semitism.
Yeah. And Biden, Genocide Joe, he is a self-proclaimed Zionist. I don't think anybody wants to be part of that club.
Yeah, he and Trump, you get a lot of difference between Biden and Trump on the topic of Israel. You get a huge amount of difference. Speaking of that, I wanted to ask you how running for president has been going, how it's felt. I got angry on your behalf against the New York Times because I noticed this the other day. Who's running for president? Under independent third party, they have RFK, Cornel West, and Jill Stein.
Yeah, the socialists never make it to those polls. I wonder why.
It's not even a poll. They're just not even listing you.
They don't. Yeah. I mean, I think it's going really well. We've received a lot of support from mostly young people all across the country. The Gen Zers, man. And TikTok is, it's a whole different experience.
Has TikTok not banned you? They banned me after about a month.
Well, what they did is they shadow banned the account, and some of the folks that support the campaign have kind of recorded themselves trying to follow the account, and then how they go back and it's like you have to follow again because somehow it doesn't work for them. But yeah, in terms of support, we've been able to visit. We had our first event outside of the East Coast in California just a couple of weeks ago, and it was great. We were able to go to Long Beach and meet different communities, meet with students, meet with labor unions. And so the support has been great because we're talking based on the material conditions of people. I was trying to hear some of the speeches from these so-called candidates from the two-party system. None of them speak about the levels of poverty in this country. They talk about the economy as if the economy itself is a person, so detached, right? Nobody runs the economy.
It's like it's doing well.
Yeah, and it's doing well.
Good, yeah.
It's feeling good, and it's your emotions, all of your emotions. The majority of people in this country have bad emotions against the economy because the economy itself is doing great. But when you talk to people, obviously, people have a different reality. They have a different reality that is, connected to inflation, connected to recession, connected to levels of unemployment, the inability to be able to organize their workplaces, the housing prices. I mean, the real material conditions that people are experiencing. And although there's some who argue, voting for a third party candidate is a wasted vote, people in communities don't seem to agree with that. It is very interesting, because they're tired. They're tired of being lied to. People are able to make the connections. I think Gaza has definitely unveiled so many of the atrocities that this capitalist and imperialist system, just the brutality of it has been unveiled. And even people who may not consider themselves political have an opinion in communities about the issue. And they understand They understand that there's no way the United States should be financing or supporting genocide. And so when you actually speak to people outside of the world of the web, um,
Yeah. Real actual human beings, do they still exist? Yeah.
yeah, they do. And and some of them don't even have, internet or access to a lot of these things. And so
Wow.
um
Yeah.
they're still connecting to, the far right media, the neoliberal media, and they're also forming their own opinions based on their concrete conditions, based on, housing that is deteriorating, rent pricing that is going up.
Wait, as you say that, I want to show you this. It's an animation of the difference between rent prices versus income. Wow. Sorry for the music.
No, it's
Anyway,
okay.
you can talk as we watch this animation go.
No, but it's crazy because obviously what's happening is that when you're talking about employment, there's many people who are unemployed or have a gig or are part of the gig economy, have multiple jobs. In terms of their salaries and income, it's stagnated. Like it hasn't increased, but yet everything else has increased. The price of housing, the price of food, gas. And so you're talking about people who have no way of surviving and are indebted to these banks through and through. And I think we've hit a point where we are beyond this idea that we could reform the system in which we are. People actually looking for vehicles to do things differently. And so for us as a third party candidate, as a campaign that is, outwardly socialist, we engage more in the conversation of what is socialism and how would socialism work in this society, because of all the propaganda and the anti-communist the imposition of anti-communism in people's lives. And so we have to do a job of deconstructing that by speaking to the fact that when we're talking about seizing the top 100 corporations, we're talking about being able to expropriate the wealth that belongs to the majority of people in this country and that has been created collectively and has been hoarded by a few. That when we're talking about, private property, a lot of people are my house, well, actually your house is owned by the bank and you have a loan. You own the debt, not the house. So we're talking about, cutting the banks that are actually enslaving you for 30 and 40 years. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about
Yeah.
cutting the health insurance companies from the equation, abolishing that, because everybody should be having access to healthcare. And so people get that.
And not only does the bank technically own the house, but then on top of that, any of these corporations could say, "Oh, we need that land for a giant, corporate center," and then the state will say, "Sorry, we're stealing your house so that we can build a giant Walmart." But also, if you look at the case of West Virginia and so many other places, the state and others came to them and said, "Well, technically, you own the surface layer of the land, so we own below you and we can drill and destroy your land, destroy your water, anything else, because you don't own more than the top few inches of that land." Like you don't really own these things, like you're saying.
Yeah, and people get it. Like again, when you ask anyone, you could ask any student, would you like to be able to have access to education without having to worry about, having to get loans, or the idea that the pressure that a lot of these kids feel that they have to go to an elite school, because that also has been created. Like you have, tens of thousands of schools, universities across the country, but if you don't make it to that one top 25, you're not good enough. And so what would it be like if we destroy the system that is constructed to give you these levels of anxiety that you don't need when you want to access an education? These young people say, yeah, that's exactly what we would want. We talk to people from the material conditions, and I think that has been really, really key. I think we're also in another point where people understand the brutality of capitalism in a different level, when they understand the brutality of like having over 800 military bases all across the globe that we don't need to have. And so when we talk to people again, for as long as we speak to our people in a way that they can understand, it makes all the difference in the world. And that's what we're trying to do with this campaign. And so the levels of support have been have been huge. And obviously you have your trolls and your haters, and we know we're gonna get into that. When we decide to do stuff like this is historic as well. You know, you get attacked from all different. I'm talking to the man who's been attacked from all sorts of sides here. But
True.
we know. Yeah,
True.
we
Hey,
know.
apparently you get to keep your TikTok page. I'm pretty upset about that. I mean, I'm not even running for president. Although I am the campaign manager for a rock I found in my yard. So
I know. You told me about this.
yeah. Well, um, what what would be like the one outside of the genocide? What would be the one issue that you really would want people to remember? You know, I think that even if third party candidates don't win in such a rigged system, there is a lot to be said for changing the ideas, changing the talking points, changing the Overton, shifting the Overton window. So what would be kind of the one issue you really want people to remember and continue to grow ongoing?
I think one of the ways of looking at our platform is not necessarily with individual issues. They're all very much connected. Like our lives, every issue that we have in our life is pretty much connected to everything else. It's looking at things holistically. And if we understand again that the very root of all of our issues, the issue of poverty, the issue of lack of access to healthcare, and and how in how many ways people are unable to access the most basic human rights, all of that is connected to the system of capitalism. And in order for anything to change, we need to uproot it. We cannot reform capitalism. We are way beyond that space. And it's very critical for us to start, if we haven't done so, to do something to transform that reality. Because if we don't start now, the process that we need for liberation becomes further and further from a reality. We need to take hold of our lives, and we can't continue to give up our power to the system. We can't continue to legitimize their institutions and them structures. So our job, our work here in the United States is to be anti-capitalist, is to be anti-imperialist, is to defend all human life against systems of oppression, and it's also to provide a solution. So we can't just be here and say we're anti all these different things without proposing a solution. For us, our solution is socialism. So we invite people to learn more about socialist revolutions, to learn more about the ways in which we can construct a socialist society in this country that is based on abundance for everyone, because this country does not have lack of resources. It has an abundance of resources, and therefore we can provide for every human being living in this country all they need to be able to sustain life and reproduce life. And so that's the basis of our campaign.
It's beautiful. Well, keep breaking people out of those mental cages. Keep waking them up to this. As you just mentioned, we certainly live in a post-scarcity world. I mean, there's 17 million empty houses around the entirety of the United States, and there's a million homeless people. But you also have plenty of people living in situations that they do not want to be, living at home when they don't want to be, living with abusive partners when they don't want to be. And of course, we could give everybody their own McMansion. We really could.
That's right. Thank you. And you keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. I will do my best. Where can people follow everything you're doing?
Folks could go to votesocialist2024.com and they could learn more about the campaign. They could register to volunteer. We have thousands of volunteers all across the country. And they could join, the campaign to bring it into communities and be in conversation with people and actually agitate our communities to do things differently this time.
Cool. Thank you, Claudia. Keep at it.
Thank you, Lee. Take care.
Take
care. Bye.
All right, there's Claudia De La Cruz. Let's see. Do I have time for one more story before I head on over to do an extra segment for the folks at Locals, for my amazing members at Locals? I think I'm going to do one more segment for everyone here. And for those who don't know, this show is completely funded by you guys. It's not actually sustainable, but I'm keeping it going anyway. But so if you want to support this show, if you want to become a member, and you get all kinds of awesome perks, such as the extra segment I'm going to do today for the folks at Locals, then you can join up at leecamp.net. If you're watching on Rumble, go down to the Join Lee tab, click that. And when you get to the next page, go to become a subscriber as opposed to become a member, which is the free version. Go to become a subscriber, and you can join up for a minimum of $6 a month. If you want to do more than that, that's awesome. 38 cents an episode. So please, everyone, consider doing that. And even if you're like 38 cents is just awfully, the hour you give me for this show is totally not worth 38 cents, maybe 31, maybe 32, but not 38. If that is your view, then please still go over to leecamp.net, my locals page, and sign up, click become a member, the free version. And you won't get everything, but you'll still get to be part of the community and be a part of it over there. So please do that. Do it right now. Help me out. All right, but I want to bring you one more segment. It's a brilliant article by Caitlin Johnstone, and I want to give some of the points she makes, but also add my own. But she's talking about how the success of the propaganda, the mental prison we're in, and she does it very well. And if you haven't heard of her stuff, it's great. She says you only need to cage a bird if it knows that it can fly. And they have successfully, the ruling elite, whatever you want to call them, have successfully gotten it so that most people across this country and across the Western world don't realize that we're able to fly, don't realize there is a form of thought that is outside of wage slavery, outside of this false scarcity, outside of step on your neighbor's throat to get an extra $10. Most people don't even realize that world could exist. And of course it could. And then, of course, peace and sustainability and everything else. She says, this is the dystopia we were warned about. The main difference between this mind-controlled dystopia and the fictional dystopias in novels like 1984 is that in 1984, and I assume she's also talking about Brave New World, maybe also Catch-22, is that in 1984, people knew they weren't living in a free society, whereas in this dystopia, the people believe they are free. In this dystopia, people have no idea how pervasively they're being dominated by their rulers. They think they came up with their ideas, with their worldview, with their political positions on their own, when in reality, those belief systems were constructed inside their skulls by a profoundly sophisticated propaganda machine without their even knowing it. And this is also true, and it's especially true right now during this genocide, where there are so many people that think that they endorse this, that think that they support this, because they are unable to get their mind outside of the propaganda that has been pumped into all of the various holes on their head. I mean, I don't know how much was pumped into their nostrils, but if there was some, that's kind of gross too. Like, don't smell the propaganda, you know? But it's been pumped into their heads, and they honestly think that these ideas make sense because they've never been told to question them, really. A lot of people never have. She says, because the overwhelming majority of us have been manipulated into espousing one of the power-serving belief systems, they give you multiple choices depending on your ideological disposition. And of course, that's the brilliance of our duopoly. I mean, it's different in various countries, but in the U.S., it's a duopoly. We just spoke to a presidential candidate outside of the two-party system, but the two-party system has rigged the entire game so that third-party candidates can barely even get on the ballot in most places, and even if they get on the ballot, they can't get any media coverage. But it is a duopoly, and you get to look at these two sides, and depending on your disposition, you get to go, oh, well, that side's the right one, or that side's the right one. And you get to decide between those two sides, never even thinking about the fact that they're agreeing on 90% of the structural issues of this country. They're agreeing largely with some little pinprick differences here and there. They're agreeing on infinite war. They're agreeing on infinite capitalism on a finite planet. And of course, capitalism can't be infinite. Capitalism is the idea of infinite growth on a planet with limited resources. So it is an impossibility that it could go on forever. We live in this prime little window as capitalism kills us all, where we're, running around going, well, could we, how long do you think we can keep this gravy train going as all the trees are chopped down? Because guess what? You can make more money chopping down a tree than leaving it up. You can make more money polluting a river than letting it run by you. You can make more money eating the birds than letting them fly around. Isn't it interesting how that works? I wonder how long that can go like that. Well, I'll give you a hint. Not too much longer. But yes, the duopoly is brilliant in that it makes people think they have a choice. That's why each of these parties, each of the two ruling parties that are actually one party, that are two cheeks of the same backside, they need each other. They need a strong other party to pretend to create this theater. That's why you never see, suddenly an election where all of every congressperson is Republican, or 75% of them are Democrats, because then it wouldn't work anymore. You wouldn't have people thinking that they have a choice anymore if all of them were one party. But of course, they are one party, but we think they're two. Anyway, to continue, the more overtly totalitarian measures described by dystopian novelists are actually unnecessary in our world. You only need to cage a bird if it knows that it can fly. If our minds are not free, then we are not free. If we're being successfully manipulated into thinking, speaking, acting, voting, working, and consuming in accordance with the wishes of the powerful, then we're just as locked down as we would be if we had chains around our necks. Collectively, we could not be more aligned with the will of the powerful than we already are, even if our brains were replaced with computer chips. We cannot be free until we have used the power of our numbers to shrug off the control of our dystopian overlords. And we'll never do that as long as a critical majority of us are unable to see how profoundly unfree we really are. There's no escaping the mind control matrix of imperial propaganda until you can see the lines of code it is made of. Our most important task then at this point in history is to keep pointing out those lines of code for as many people as possible, in as many ways as you can think of. Keep pointing out the ways that we are not free, that we are mentally not free. They'll never grant us a major mainstream platform on which to do this, but we can operate within the margins, waking up one person at a time to the reality of what's going on. Not only will they not grant you a major mainstream platform, I mean, I got lucky in that I, for a bit, had one on RT America, but then first they suppressed RT America, so after 2016, the RT wasn't getting nearly the numbers that they used to. But then even that was too much, because a little bit of truth goes a long way. A little bit of truth is like a seed you plant in someone's brain, and then it blossoms into, oh my God, and the charade unravels, to mix my metaphors. The charade unravels into a curtain that catches on fire. If I can put all those metaphors together into that, whatever that is. But even that was too much, right? To just suppress RT America. So they had to ultimately sanction it into oblivion. It's no longer, RT America doesn't exist anymore. And even my YouTube page was too much. So that's been banned around the world. So, and it wasn't just, they didn't want to just demonetize it. That was, that's step one, is demonetize it. But step two is, if demonetizing isn't enough, people are still getting the information. They're still learning. That's too much. So we need to ban it around the world. My page is banned around the world. So the original page. Now on this new page, we're getting close to 60,000 followers. So if you can help me out, click subscribe. Anyway, so to continue from the article, go around spreading the truth, fighting the propaganda, weakening public trust in the mass media and the political constructs it manufactures consent for, highlighting the depravity and murderousness of the empire. Use any and all media and forums you find to be effective. And, if there is any small positive in this horrific, gut-wrenching, goddamn day after day genocide, it is that it is unraveling this ridiculous propaganda. Your average person cannot look at the images day after day of dead children being pulled out of rubble and go, yeah, this is fine. Yeah, this is okay. Yeah, this is something we should be excited about. They just can't. And so it is unraveling. I mean, to say the least, the propaganda is unraveling. So that is a tiny, tiny positive in this horrible shit show. The last sentence here, the propaganda machine is the linchpin of their power. It's what holds the empire together. Without the ability to manipulate the public at mass scale, our rulers cannot rule, cannot control us. Thank you so much, James, for the super chat. Truly appreciate that. You guys are what keeps this show going. Can't thank you enough. But yes, great article there and great points made. And, I will say that I feel like over my time, 15 years of talking about political issues, I started as a comedian long before that, but 15 years of talking about these issues, I have seen a lot of people wake up to a lot of things. And you've seen massive switches on certain issues, such as, being anti-drug war and legalization or decriminalization of a lot of drugs, gay marriage and acceptance of people who are the oppressed in our societies. There's so many areas that we're seeing a lot of shift. I mean, hell, just the waking up on the true history of the United States of America. I have a whole podcast on that called Government Secrets, if you'd like to check it out. But people are waking up to that. I mean, the number of people that know that the CIA killed Kennedy or know about the truth about Christopher Columbus. I mean, those numbers have shot through the roof over the past several years. And that's thanks to so many of you taking the time out of your days to learn about these things, but then also sharing it with people, speaking about it. And so there is a lot of positive in that. There's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. All right, I'm going over to chat with the people that actually make this show possible over at leecamp.net, my locals page. So if you're on locals right now, stay there. Don't go away. I'm headed your way. And to everyone else who can't make that jump right now, I still love you. You're still the best. And I will see you tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. You often will not get an alert, even if you click the bell icon. Please do it anyway. But you often won't get alerts. So please just show up. Just show up to these. Yeah, show up. 4 days a week. It's actually 5 if you count Government Secrets. That's Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. But 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Just show up. Show up and join us. Be a part of it. Be a part of the chat. Why? Why not? Why miss out on this hangout? Huh? Why would you do that to me? I need you. I need you. So yeah, thank you and see you tomorrow. And to everybody at locals coming your way, and keep fighting, everybody. Okay, locals, just give me 1 second to purge all of these awful other people. No, I'm kidding. I know some of you still watching. I'm kidding. You're not awful. You're wonderful.